Welcome, everyone. You are listening to Get Out of Your Own Way with me, April Yee, on Transformation Talk Radio. Get out of your way and get what you want through transformative self-care. I'm here to support you in getting out of your own way. So, what does getting in your own way look like? Well, how about letting other people define your value and worth, ignoring your body by not taking care of yourself, and people-pleasing? These are just a few ways I've gotten in my own way. In this show, I'll share new perspectives on self-care practices so you can discover options and choices for expanding what's possible for you and your life. In each episode, I have questions for you, and when you take the time to answer them, they'll help in building up your belief about yourself. I believe that when we get good with ourselves, we get good with our lives and the world. Get Out of Your Own Way starts now. Hi, everyone. I'm April Yee, and you are listening to Get Out of Your Own Way on Transformation Talk Radio, episode 10. The concepts I talk about in each episode are things I wish I learned sooner to support myself and get out of my own way. So I hope these ideas are coming to you when you need them. So today we're going to be talking about how the stories we tell ourselves get in our way. So, what does that mean? And how do the stories we tell ourselves get in our way? I'll start with a quote from Dr. Wayne Dyer. And this quote says, "With everything that has happened to you, you can either feel sorry for yourself or treat what has happened as a gift. Everything is either an opportunity to grow or an obstacle to keep you from growing. You get to choose." And I really appreciate this quote because it shows us that we have a choice in what we believe about ourselves and our lives, and a choice in what we tell ourselves about ourselves and our lives. So, what we believe about ourselves and our lives is usually based on stories that we tell about ourselves and our lives. So let's look at what happens when we have stories that we tell ourselves about our past, our current lives, and about our future. But first, I want to clarify the difference between facts and stories. So, what we do is we base stories off of our facts. And facts are the circumstances that happen in our lives that we can call factual because they happened and everyone can agree on these things. Like if you were arguing in a court of law, it would be a fact based on measurable evidence. So the weather is a fact because we can measure it and everyone can agree that it's 76 degrees Fahrenheit today, for example. Or I have one brother and one sister is a fact. My birthday is in January is a fact. My age is a fact. I live in San Francisco is a fact. I weigh 132 pounds is a fact. I am single and never been married is a fact. But what we do with the facts of our lives is that we usually make up stories about these facts. We make the facts mean something about ourselves or about our lives. And this isn't a bad thing in and of itself. As humans, we interpret our lives and give meaning to things, but how we feel depends on what our interpretations are. So, for example, some stories about the facts I just listed could be, "It's so hot outside today." And this is a story for me because some people may not think it's hot outside today. Someone else might say it's so pleasant outside today. Another story I would make up about a fact is I had to be the responsible older sibling. Another story about a fact is because I'm a Capricorn, I'm supposed to be ambitious, disciplined, serious, and critical. And that's a story about a fact that I was born in January. I'm old is a story about the fact of my age. Some people might agree that I'm old, and some people might think I'm young. So that's why it's a story. I live in one of the country's best cities is a story about a fact that I live in San Francisco. I'm not at a good weight for myself is another story about a fact. And it's so hard to find a partner, or I'll never find a partner is another story about a fact. So, are you getting a sense of it now? Basically, as human beings, we love to make up stories about facts, and this is how we experience our lives. And sometimes the stories serve us, and sometimes they hurt us and get in our way. So if I keep telling myself the story that it's hard to find a partner or I'll never find a partner, how do you think that will affect how I show up when I'm meeting new people or going on dates? And sometimes even some of the observations we make about ourselves are more like stories about ourselves instead of actual facts about ourselves. And we can change the stories if we want. And I did talk about that in the previous episode about believing new things. And if you haven't listened to that one yet, you can go check it out. So, where else in our lives do we tell ourselves stories? We tell ourselves stories about our past, about our present, and about our future. We tell stories about people in our lives, about things that happen to us, about things that we have or don't have. We are always telling ourselves stories. So why not make them good ones instead of bad ones? And this isn't to say that we need to have toxic positivity in our stories about ourselves, but rather to show that we get to interpret our past, our present, and our future the way we want to on purpose. And we get to choose the story we tell ourselves about everything. So, does that seem radical or delusional to you? If you think about it, whatever story we might be telling ourselves about something, that could already be considered delusional because what is it based on? It's based on some automatic reactions to circumstances that happened, and it's based on our interpretation of things. And when we tell ourselves stories on purpose instead, we're just choosing intentionally how we want to think about things in ways that serve us versus automatic ways that may not serve us as well. And I've been using the phrase serve us and not serve us. And I had a client ask me to clarify what I meant by this one time. And since it was a question for her, it may be a question for others. So I'd like to address it here. And when I say that something serves us, I mean that it is something beneficial for us or a healthy behavior or choice. And when something doesn't serve us, it may hurt us, may cause us pain or suffering. It's not beneficial for us, and it may be an unhealthy behavior or choice. And wouldn't it be helpful for us to know the difference and have agency in this for ourselves? So, as an example, here I'm going to present three stories about something that happened in my past. Actually, one will be based on facts. So, this first example, in 2015, I got very sick and didn't know what was happening to me or my body. I knew I was sick, but I didn't know what was wrong. And I went to see a doctor who ended up misdiagnosing me. And for 2 weeks, my symptoms got worse and worse until I saw another doctor. And that doctor finally um, chose the right test to do. And I was called into the ER to talk to the doctors. And they told me that I had a blood infection and that the blood infection had also, the bacteria in my blood had vegetated on my heart and ate up two of my heart valves. And I was admitted to the hospital within 24 hours. Within the next 5 days, I had to do these terrible tests that were painful and traumatic. And finally, on the sixth day, the doctors, my surgeon performed emergency open heart surgery on me. And that experience was so traumatic and scary. And now I can't live my life the way that I want to, that I used to before. I used to be able to work 14-hour days. I used to be able to have the energy to go everywhere and do everything that I wanted to do. And now I can't. And that's one way to tell the story. And that was actually kind of hard for me to do because it was such a different perspective than how I actually thought about things and went through things. But it could be easy to have gone down a negative route facing something as big and traumatic as that for some people. And so another way I could tell that same story is that in 2015, I got very sick. I didn't know what was happening to me or my body. And I finally saw the right doctor who did the right tests, and I was admitted to the hospital. I did have to go undergo pre procedure treatments to see so the doctors could find out exactly what was going on with my heart and my body. And then I did undergo an 11-hour long surgery where my surgeon worked very hard to repair two of my heart valves and save my life. And after that experience, I recognized that I got a second chance to do things differently. And now I'm living my life in a way that is even more aligned with who I want to be and what I believe my purpose is. So that's another way that I can tell that story. And what does it sound like to focus on the facts only? So, this third way I can tell the story or tell the facts is that in 2015, I contracted a blood infection that damaged two of my heart valves. I was admitted to the ER and then to the hospital. And over the course of 5 days, I went through a blood transfusion, an echocardiogram, a chest x ray, and a transesophageal echocardiogram. On the sixth day, I underwent an 11-hour long surgery. The surgeon used animal tissue valves to replace the damaged mitral and aortic valves. I was in the hospital for 1 month. And I could tell you about the facts of my recovery process once I got home from the hospital and what that entailed. But I think you get the picture when there's no story associated with the facts. And basically, my point is that facts don't hurt. So the circumstances of our lives have no effect on us until they encounter our mind and we attach meaning to them. So we aren't sad about someone dying until our mind registers the fact. The person's death, which may have happened days ago, has no effect on us at all. And it could be that at the moment they died, we were laughing at a joke because our minds weren't aware of what happened. And we can learn and practice separating out the facts from our thoughts. So it's less accurate to say, I was devastated when they died. And it's more accurate to say, I was devastated by what I thought about their death. And these semantics matter because when we really recognize that our minds cause our feelings, and I've talked about this in the self-awareness model that I've talked about, thoughts, circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, and results. So when we really recognize that our minds cause our feelings, we can be a lot more in control of our emotional lives. And it doesn't mean that we won't choose to be sad when someone dies. We most likely will. But it does mean we can decide not to be mad when something much less significant happens in our lives. And we manage our emotional lives with our thinking. So, again, our thoughts create our feelings. And for example, if you say work stresses me out, it's your thoughts about work that stress you out. Although you might not be able to change your job at this very moment, you can definitely change the way you think about your job. And that changes everything. So we create our lives mostly with our minds, and we often believe our stories so deeply that we think they're facts when they're not. And this is fine as long as the story isn't painful or causing problems in our lives. But like I mentioned before, many of our stories are painful and can even be debilitating. And I'll just give another example of someone who is furious with her sister in law. And this is the story that she tells. My sister in law doesn't respect me. She doesn't love me. She wants me to be fat. She can't support me in my desires or dreams. Even when she knows what I want for myself, she's always trying to sabotage me. For example, by making certain foods for dinner when she knows I'm working on losing weight. It's like I don't even want to be around her because of the awful things she does. Just this last weekend, we went to her home for a visit, and she was so backhanded, so conniving by making spaghetti for dinner. I know my husband, this is his sister, doesn't even care. He doesn't back me up when I feel this way, and he refuses when I suggest we should confront her and stop visiting her. I think I'm going to have to give him an ultimatum. It's either her or me. He's a grown man and he needs to make this decision. And in the end, the facts that happened over the weekend are, or the facts about this story that this woman is telling is that she has a sister in law. She went to her sister in law's home last weekend. Her sister in law made spaghetti, and everything else was a story, a pretty painful story about this woman and her sister in law. And so this woman's sister in law had made spaghetti, which she interpreted as conniving and an attempt to sabotage her weight loss. And could the spaghetti perhaps have meant something else to her sister in law? Were there any other ways to interpret the facts that might feel better? And she could acknowledge that maybe her sister in law made spaghetti because her brother loves spaghetti. She's Italian and it's one of her specialties. So either her original story or the latter one could be true, but which one serves her better? And which story serves the relationship better? And even more, she could consider how it felt to leave the facts alone and not insert a meaning or a story about those facts. So my sister in law made spaghetti. Without a story, this fact doesn't hurt. And facts never do hurt. And so when we realize that we're creating a painful story, we can learn how to separate out the facts from our story. And then we get to create our pain or our peace or our happiness by how we choose to interpret the facts. And in thinking about the stories we tell ourselves, this brings up a couple things that I think are important for us to consider. So, one question is, where does the past exist? And what does it mean to fight or argue against reality? So, a lot of people talk about their painful pasts and how their pasts are affecting them in their present. And what I want to offer is that the past is a circumstance, the past happened, and so it's a fact. But it's what we tell ourselves, the story we tell ourselves about the past in the present that creates pain for ourselves in the present. And that's the only way the past can create pain for us, is how we think about the past in the present. And again, some people talk about old wounds or pain that they have. And old pain, again, like what happened in the past, you know, was painful in the past. And the only way it's creating pain for us now in our present is because of the way we're thinking about what happened in the past. So the pain, like, yes, it could be a painful experience in the past, but the past can't hurt us now unless we're thinking about the past in a way that creates pain for us now. And so I know that might be a little hard to wrap our heads around at first, but when you think about it, it really does make sense. And if we can treat the past as a circumstance, as a fact, then we can tell the story we want about the past and we can interpret it in the way that we want. And so fighting against reality is kind of similar. When we fight against reality, we are saying that something that happened shouldn't have happened, or it shouldn't be this way, or it's unfair that it's this way. Um, Basically, what we end up doing along with fighting reality is sometimes we are even argue with our own stories about reality. So we create a story about someone or something, and then we fight against it instead of seeing it for what it actually is. So what I mean by that is if we create a story about someone and the story is like, oh, they shouldn't be this way, they're to this, they're to that, they should be this other way, they're not behaving the way they should behave. Those are stories about how we think someone should be behaving. And what has been really helpful for me to learn is that we let people behave the way that they want. Otherwise, it's like we're trying to control their behavior. And that only causes us pain because probably the other person doesn't think that they're doing anything wrong. And we're the ones thinking that they're doing something wrong. So that creates anger and frustration or annoyance for us. And we can really get in our own way by doing this. And sometimes it's really hard to even see that we have stories about people or things or our past. We just think that they're true, that they're facts. And this is where a life coach can provide value and perspective, and where a life coach can see that there's a story and help you see how to unravel or disengage from the story, or even to tell the story in a different way that serves you. And we can unravel the facts from the story. And so, how do we retell our stories in ways that serve us? I think that I'll list some ways that and some examples that we can do this. And, I think it would be really beneficial and valuable for you to choose a couple of things and to even write things out or just really think about these questions that I'm going to offer. So we don't have to rely on our past for our identity. I think, and this goes back to what we believe about ourselves and the stories that we tell about our past. Um, we can decide on purpose who we want to be, and we can rely on our future to think about who we want to be. So we can take the knowledge we need from the past and leave the rest of the story. We can write a letter to our past self. So, what advice would you give to your past self? What would you say? We can tell the story of our past in two different ways. One where we had a horrible childhood and an awful upbringing, and one where we had the perfect childhood. And no matter what your past and your childhood were, it's it can be really beneficial to think about the benefits of, okay, how did my childhood and upbringing happen for me to become the person I am today? And we can notice our something went wrong stories and rewrite them. So again, how did these things happen for you instead of to you? How did things happen exactly as they were meant to in order for you to become who you are today? And you can also notice your I should have had stories and also rewrite them. Again, how did things happen for you instead of to you? And how did things happen exactly as they were meant to in order for you to become who you are today? You can find any place in your life where you have regret and retell the story where you don't have that feeling. And because that feeling isn't useful now, you can move into your future without feeling regret for your past. And you can also break down stories to facts only, like I mentioned before. So it could be he said something, I said something, then I cried. And those are facts, but notice how we fill in the details and how painful they might be for no good reason. And lastly, you can choose to retell the story of your life where you are the hero and not the victim. So, my message to you today is that we can get out of our own way by becoming aware of when our stories or narratives are serving us or not serving us. We can remember that our past can't hurt us, but what we think about our past can cause us pain and suffering now in the present. And we can change how we think about our past, our present, and our future in ways that bolster us instead of keeping us stuck. So notice what stories you've been telling yourself or making up about situations and people and things. And how do these stories leave you feeling? Now think about the facts. What are the facts? And how do the facts leave you feeling? And what are the narratives that you have about yourself and your life that serve you? And what are the narratives that do not serve you? And what stories do you want to tell yourself instead? How are you the hero of that story? How did that situation happen for you instead of happening to you? And what does that for you story sound like instead of that to you story? And how do you feel after telling yourself the for you story? I'm so glad you joined me for this episode of Get Out of Your Own Way. To go even deeper, join me for Self-Care Sundays, monthly drop-in sessions, and you can find out more at healingmodalities.com. You can also sign up for my weekly Self-Care Seeds newsletter there. And join me again for Get Out of Your Own Way every other Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Central, and 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. Next time on Get Out of Your Own Way, I'll be talking about our future selves and how we can take care of them now. And if you have any goals, your future self is the one who is going to accomplish them, right? So even if it's your future self in 2 hours who will decide not to eat that bowl of ice cream that you made a plan not to eat 24 hours in advance, and it may be your future self tomorrow or in 1 week, in 2 months, in 1 year, or in 5 years. So what do you want to do for your future self to help them along the way? And just as an example, if your goal is to spend less in order to save an extra $5,000 by the end of the year, what can you do today to help your future self get to that goal? And what will you do tomorrow and the next day and the next to support your future self who will have saved $5,000 by the end of the year? Have a great week, and I'll see you next time. You have been listening to Get Out of Your Own Way. Get out of your way and get what you want through transformative self-care with me, April Yee. Tune in every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. In each episode, I present you questions that support you in building up your beliefs about yourself. To connect with me or for more information, you can email me at thehealingmodalities@gmail.com or visit my website, thehealingmodalities.com. See you soon.